Hello again. We are back. I'm Devin. I'm an alcoholic, and hopefully we'll get a few more people kind of rolling through, and we'll keep this kind of ongoing conversation through the traditions going with tradition 7 today. And and yeah, I'm just really grateful to have an opportunity to be able to do this. And as Karthik mentioned in the opening, I'm not interested in a monologue, so please like interrupt me, come in, ask questions. I want to hear about how some of this stuff may or may, have shown up in your groups in your area, and in your lives. And if you have questions or comments, like let's if we can have more of a discussion, because I think if it's a one-way street, well, you guys know I have a lot to say. So if you don't cut me off, it's just gonna go. But sometimes that's not the most exciting thing all around. So please jump in, and let's have a discussion about this. And one of the things we've been trying to do is to look at the couple of different angles with our traditions to give us a little bit of historical context and take a look at the essays that Bill wrote that are in the book, The 12 Steps and the 12 Traditions, to understand a bit of the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and the importance of why we came to even having guidelines, um, like spiritual guidelines for how to operate and how to be as a group, and then also then how we can start to see um, these principles be woven into our personal lives, and we start to hopefully realize that the traditions are all about relationships, that everything that I'm asked to give up and I'm asked to consider in the 12 traditions is something that's directly applicable in all other group activities that I might find myself in, all other relationships I find myself inside and outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, I'm married. So these are 12 principles that I get to sit and consider in my marriage. I'm a son. I have parents. I have a sister. I have a niece. I have relationships and other roles in the world. And I can use these as a blueprint to sit back and ask myself, how am I showing up in these relationships? And do I have some blind spots? And are there things that I'm missing? And to me, that's where the traditions become less, that's for something else. I need the steps because I need to recover. And they started to be like, oh, well, the 12 steps suggest I'm supposed to practice these principles in all my affairs. And there's no page in AA that just says, here's the AA principles. But they're woven throughout this whole thing. And a lot of us will talk about having, 36 principles, meaning the steps, the traditions, and the 12 concepts of world service. And so we spoke that in the beginning on tradition 1, how every tradition here wraps us up into unity. Just like the first step, every step leads us back to powerless. Why am I going to make amends? Well, I'm powerless. I have to, or I'm going to drink. Why am I going to write that inventory or continue to take that inventory? I need power. I'm powerless. So, I'm motivated by my desperation in my first step experience to live the 12 steps. Conversely, hopefully we're motivated by our first tradition that suggests that the most important thing is that AA stays united. That we realize that more important than anything that I think needs to happen here, the most important thing is that Alcoholics Anonymous continues to be connected and united as a whole. That if our meeting structures fall apart and our service structure falls apart, that's going to do all of the alcoholics that have yet to show up. This is what Dave and I were just talking about in the beginning of our phone call. That there's, it's like you guys there's generations coming behind us. Alcoholism has been around since the dawn of man and the beginning of us crushing grapes. So, there's going to be alcoholics that show up for generations to come. And I want there to be an AA for them. And so it's my job to potentially, not potentially, but it's my job to try to safeguard this thing so that those that come after can actually be able to be a recipient of this gift. And so tradition 1 leads us into everything. We talked about unity. We talked about group conscience. We talked about anybody can show up. There's no membership requirement. If you want to be here, you say you're a member, you're here. We talked about some of the different lines there, though, of what would, you can be a member and not necessarily be an alcoholic. And then, as a sponsor, I'm not necessarily here to sponsor non-alcoholics. So that changes that conversation a little bit. And we talked about what does it mean to be autonomous in my personal life and be mindful of my actions, And then ultimately we get to primary purpose in tradition 5 a couple sessions ago, and about how the one reason that we get together in AA is to carry a message of recovery to the alcoholic who still suffers. And then we start to see how the traditions that start to follow give us warnings that might pull us away from that primary aim. And so when we get to tradition 7, we start to see, well, what else could pull me? And welcome to the people that are just making it. When we get to tradition 7, we start to get an idea of what else can pull me away from potentially having this one purpose. And so tradition 7 in the short form reads, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. And I think if any of us have been to a meeting, this is the one that most people are the most familiar with, because at every meeting I've ever been to, there's an announcement at some point to say, hey, in observance of the 7th tradition, we pass the basket. And a lot of times meetings will say, we need you more than we need your money. There's maybe a suggested contribution. Like in New York, it's expensive. So my home group says there's a suggested contribution of $3. We need you more than your money. And we pass the basket because we have expenses. And so a lot of us have that experience of being in a meeting and the basket gets passed and you see people throwing a couple of dollars in. And so we go, okay. Now I'm a firm believer that we have to announce what that's about. One of my heroes would talk about, if I'm new and I don't know anything and I don't have any money, and all of a sudden there's just a basket going around and people are throwing money, and I start to get this idea that this costs something. And if I don't have any money and you're telling me I got to go to 90 meetings in 90 days or whatever you hear at a bunch of these meetings, and now people are putting $2 in the basket, I can do quick math and realize I might need about $200 to get sober. And how that's, that could be a barrier for somebody that has nothing to come in. And so I'm a big believer that the 7th tradition should always be followed with an announcement that is clear. We operate off of one single idea here with money. We're self-supporting. So we don't take money from non-alcoholics. We don't take money from any outside entities. Our job here is to be fully self-supporting. And so here's a question I'll ask you before I get into reading through the long form, which goes through a bunch more. But why do you think that's important? What does this idea of being self-supporting bring to Alcoholics Anonymous, or bring to any of us in our own personal lives? And let's think, purely right now on a financial thing. Go ahead, Karthik.
Yeah. So, I like the point that, there needs to be an announcement. Even I agree with that. Before you pass the kitty, there should be an announcement, so that if somebody does not know about it, they need to have a clear idea why the kitty is being passed. And but I just wanted to add, it's just not an alcoholic that can contribute; it's an AA member that can contribute. So you may be an alcoholic, but you may not be an A. You have not yet decided to be an AA member. Then you may not contribute. So that's one thing I wanted to add. And also, why is it important? Because we don't want our outside influences. That's why there are also limits, uh, so that even inside influences are not too high. So both outside and inside influences.
Yeah, that's really the biggest warning, right? So, and let's think about a story about that. And if anyone had trouble hearing that, the main worry that we have here is that outside influence. I mean, and so let's think about, and where I live in the States, like one of the biggest, and I probably everywhere, one of the biggest issues you see when you get into like government and the halls of power is they call it the lobbying interest, and it's like the money that comes from people with interests, and they show up and they offer to help, and the people that are trying to get elected go, hey, I need your help, and then all of a sudden that elected person looks back and they have a list of friends in quotes that helped them out and sent them a bunch of money, and those people come calling and say, hey, we see there's a vote coming up, and it'd be really bad for us if that passed. And if you took $5 million from this person, right? Like it's how do you say no to them, right? And so that's I think what we're talking about with AA is if I've been taking a free handout as an AA group, how do I say no and set down any kind of barrier or boundary that this isn't going to fly if I've been taking a free handout? So here's a scenario that could happen. And so the way to let's say you are looking for a new meeting space, and over here it's a lot of times we look for a church. So let's say we find a church, and maybe a couple of us go talk to the pastor or the priest or whatever, the minister, and we go, hey, we have this alcohol. We're members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we need a meeting space, and we thought maybe this church would be have a room for us, and maybe this pastor goes, oh, I just love what you guys have been doing. I've been hearing about Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been waiting for you guys to come. I've been wanting to have this in my parish for a long time. I just think it would be great to have as a part of our community here. You go, great. And he goes, here's the thing. What day were you thinking? Well, we think, Monday would be really good. He goes, oh, Monday. You know what? On Sunday, after church, we always have a bunch of food and stuff left over, and we never really know what to do with it. And sometimes it just goes bad by the middle of the week. We can leave that all out for you. And you guys can just have whatever you want. And we always have leftover coffee and stuff. So we'll make sure that you guys have some coffee and tea because you guys, we'll be able to, that'll just all be there. And you can just have whatever you want. Now, if you're, two AA members and you're going, man, we need a space. Now we got coffee. I mean, this guy's hooking us up. You go, cool, man. Thank you so much, Father John. And so you start showing up and the meeting starts to grow. And maybe 2 years in, you're, 25, 30 people showing up every Monday in the evening. And, and the pastor walks in and he goes, man, so cool. It's so amazing to see you guys growing. How's everything going? You like, is the food's been okay? And you got snacks and that's great. How's the coffee? Oh, okay, great. Hey, so I have this thing and so side note, let's say you made it a closed meeting for alcoholics only. That was your group conscience. You said this is going to be for alcoholics only, and we're doing our thing. And then the pastor, after 2 years or so of you going to his space and him giving you the space and giving you some food and giving you all this stuff, he goes, I have some parishioners and we have this small little group and I've I'm aware of what AA is about, and I really just think they've got some problems with some drugs and some money stuff, and it seems like they could really benefit from what you guys are doing over here. And I just, I was going to send them over on Monday night. I figured I'd give you a heads up. Now, if you've got a closed meeting for alcoholics only, and this landlord effectively, or the pastor of the church is saying, I've got non-alcoholics that I want to send to your meeting. And if you've been accepting free space and free whatever and taking that kind of handout from him, how are you going to say, well, unfortunately, this is a meeting for alcoholics only, and we can't have them to the meeting. How are you going to put down any of that and talk to them about our principles or our traditions of who's allowed at a closed or an open meeting? You've been accepting free stuff from this guy for 2 years. And so what Karthik talked about being free of outside influence is really important. That the reason that in AA we need to be self-supporting and not take money from anybody outside of AA is we don't want anybody to be able to come in and add influence and start to say, that word alcoholics, what if we change it to alcoholics and addicts? What if you could just amend your first step? Because we clearly, NA, it's struggling program, but maybe we could get, everybody could just get sober under one roof. And if we've been accepting that money and we've been saying, yeah, we'll take that, and we're just, then how do we say no? If we become dependent on the money, the money coming in from other agencies or other places, how do we say no if they give us a request because we don't have our independence? And so let me read the long form really quick. The long form says a lot more, and it talks about some other components that we might want to consider. One, it says the AA groups themselves ought to be fully supported by the voluntary contributions of their own members. So to Karthik's point, he said it shouldn't even be an AA member. You have to be an AA member to contribute. There's groups that would say if you're not a group member, please don't contribute to the basket. because it suggests that the group membership is who supports the meeting, not just the people in attendance of the meeting. Now, a lot of times that's not necessarily going to be followed. You pass the basket. If somebody's visiting from out of town, they're going to throw some money in. If I'm in a group and I've got some cash and I took a cup of coffee and a couple of cookies, like I feel like I want to pay my own way for that, because they put this stuff out and I want to pay for it. Um, but it says we think that each group should soon achieve this ideal, that any public solicitation of funds using the name of Alcoholics Anonymous is highly dangerous. We don't do fundraisers. We don't do AA nonprofit, gala. My wife works at a nonprofit. They do a gala twice a year with a huge party down in Cipriani's, which is this fancy place in South the financial district. And, they spend $80,000 on the entertainment and the band, and they get all these, big celebrities to come in and they raise a bunch of money. And it's a nonprofit that, is reclaiming food and getting food to food banks for free all over the New York area. It's a really wonderful cause, but they need money, right? So they solicit all these funds and they get all these people, and then they come in and have we don't do that in AA. We're not here to raise money. Why? Remember last time, tradition 6, the warning. Problems of money might divert me from my primary purpose. And so now they start to talk about how do we ward off the distinction or the desire for more. They say whether by groups, clubs, hospitals, or outside agencies, any solicitation of funds in the name of Alcoholics Anonymous is highly dangerous. That acceptance of large gifts from any source or of contributions carrying any obligation whatever is unwise too. Then, too, we view with much concern those AA treasuries which continue beyond prudent reserves to accumulate funds for no stated AA purpose. Experience has often warned us that nothing can so surely destroy our spiritual heritage as feudal disputes over property, money, and authority. So this again is tying in what we talked about in tradition 6, that property, money, and authority or prestige are really important watchwords and things that we have to be careful over. Go ahead, Karthik.
So coming back to the point, there are a couple of points. One is you said that we don't raise money, but I see some meetings selling T-shirts, even selling literature at a marked up price. They do. So how does that come in? Like, if you're selling keychains, T-shirts, and things like that, isn't that raising money? That's one. The second point is I know that there is no limit for a member how much they can contribute in a kitty. Of course, there is to the trusted service, there is a limit. But to the kitty, there is no limit. I can contribute whatever I want. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on both of these.
So what was the part that you said you could contribute for the which part? There's no limit?
The kitty, the hat.
Like at the group.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. Those are great questions. I'm not no I guess I've seen groups that make their own merch and stuff. I think so let me step back for a sec. Number one, right, these are guidelines. They're not rules. And so each group under the tradition of autonomy has the right to be wrong. And so groups can make decisions and they can do whatever. And if they have funds in their, they've got enough contributions coming in and they decide, hey, we want to go have a big event and throw a picnic and blow a bunch of money for our group membership, buying a bunch of food and doing a picnic, well, we could do that, right? Um, and that may not be, what other groups would say is, oh, I should contribute this down the service structure so that we have, money flowing down to our service organizations below us. And if they decide, hey, we could make some merch and wouldn't it be cool? We could have matching, t-shirts or coffee mugs. I think a group could decide to do that. And if they decide to make a bunch of money with it, then I would be, that would be concerning. And that's basically concerning because of what they talk about. It is unwise for any AA group to accumulate funds beyond a prudent reserve, and to accumulate funds for no stated AA purpose. So I think it comes down to, like, I guess each group could decide to be whatever they want to do as far as merch. As far as contributions to AA as a whole versus to the group, you're correct. It was $5,000 per member. They were talking about trying to get that up to $10,000 per member. I can't remember if that has changed, but there was like they tried to like increase the amount of money that each individual member over here could contribute in a calendar year. And one of the reasons why that number was being increased was looking at inflation and just saying, hey, money is worth, but the reality is, if you look at our graphs at the end of our conference, the chart looks, I guess, it looks like this. If this is a 0 point, and up here is the over on the bottom is like the amount of money, and up here is the amount of contributions. It goes like this, and it tails off. And the amount of people that actually contribute the maximum per year is like a fraction of a percentage or something. It's very small. And then most of the contributions that AA gets are within the like a couple of dollars to like $50 over a year from a member, which I think is a beautiful chart to see that most of the money that AA gets is small contributions from its members rather than these large sums. But again, back to what you said initially, the reason that there's a cap on that is because it's a safeguard for any member. Because I don't know about you, but I want distinction. I want you to see me as an authority, or I want some kind of, it's like I have this innate ego within me that suggests I'm important. And if I have money and I can essentially go and buy a larger outsized voice than, say, any of you on this meeting, because I just happen to have money, then that kind of blows apart the idea that we're all equal here and each member has one vote and nobody's more important than any other member. And I think that, and then we don't have leaders, we have servants, right? We do service in AA. We don't, I don't take over and rule. And so we cap it for an individual member to basically say that no member could then come to the office and try to exercise some kind of power play or offer that they, look, I've given you guys $500,000 this last year. You should change this thing that I want. It's the same as accepting outside money for a fundraiser, for anything else. We don't become beholden to a member. But with your group, what you kind of asked the question is, well, what's the loophole? The group as a group could contribute any amount of money to AA as a whole. And members can send their group however much money they want. And so there is like that. That's, I guess, if you wanted to look at it as a loophole. But as far as AA is concerned over here, like there's no group that gets to come in and say, we're going to withhold our money and you're not going to get it. There's, no one has that kind of pull. And I don't know if we've ever seen that kind of an issue. But so I think to your group, you're allowed to contribute whatever you want. I know people that there was a meeting here that had to find a new space. And this will give you a window to the insanity of New York City. It was 1 hour once a week, and they found a space at a YMCA, community room in a YMCA on 14th Street. And they moved in and they were charged $200 for that one meeting every week. I mean, imagine $200 for your meeting. Right here, this costs $200. All right, guys, cough it up. Here's the basket. We're going to pass it again and again. And they had one guy who was like a big time finance dude, and he would just throw in like $170 every week or something because he was like, I believe in this meeting. I helped found the meeting. I got the money. I just want to make sure the group goes through this rough patch. And and they were able to sort it out. And then they're up at a church in Columbus Circle. The group is small and it's still there, and it's a great group. But it's it was like there was one member that said, I'm going to help prop this thing up because I helped start it. And that, as a group member, that's allowed to do that. But I think that, to me, the safeguard is I'm not important here. I'm not more important than anybody. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what these traditions have taught me, is that as a member, I am equal to any other member, and you are equal to me as a member. What we have is people with varying degrees of experience and time as members, but that doesn't mean we're in positions to have a voice that's larger or more outsized than any other member. And so giving us some limits on the financial stuff helps to create that hopefully level playing field where I'm not more important and I'm not able to come in and change anything. Go ahead, Pavan. Sorry for taking a minute there.
Very nice. Um, oh, you asked Pavan?
Oh, he had his hand up first, so I was going to ask Pavan because his hand was up first.
Right. Thanks, Karan. So, Devin, I understand what you said about uh, donations from outside contributions and what have you. Now, what happens in the case of a alcoholic that leaves uh, a certain portion of their estate or will to A, right? And with no strings attached per se, right? Simply a grateful AA member, right? And would he be able to say, I want to donate it to this group and this group, or does he or she have to say this goes to the GSO and wherever it goes, right? Second is, would it be acceptable if it's a family member, a parent, for instance, or a sister or brother of an AA member who's grateful for their family member's recovery, although they themselves are not a member of AA, right? Do they get to donate as part of their, will or testament, what have you?
Did we lose? Did we lose Pavan in the middle of that? I don't want to answer the question if he asked it and then froze. Um, well, I'll answer it now because we're recording, and then we can go back. Oh, you're back. You froze up
I don't
on
know what
us.
happened. I don't know what happened. Sorry.
But
What I'm
was that the
saying,
end of the question, or was there more to that?
no, that was pretty much the question. Yes.
So it's a great question, and it's part of I believe if it's and I could be wrong because these have been kind of tinkered with and looked at in the last 5 years, 6 years at a couple of conferences over here. But I believe over here we're still at the $5,000 a year per member, and then I think it's $10,000 is the I can't remember the word for it, but the if you die, you could leave up to 10 grand for AA. But then if it's to the general service office, then they cut it off. They go, we can't take more than this, right? So they even have a cap on um, they even
It's the
have a cap,
lifetime, Devin. It's the lifetime commitment,
right?
a
So
lifetime contribution, rather. Sorry.
the yeah, I can't. I wish there's some kind of word for when you die, what that is, like in a legal way. But yeah, they basically say it's about $10,000. That's all we'll accept when you die, and they give us the example like, specifically of what you asked about, like a family member giving a check to AA for $10,000, and how um it was a certain lady had died. When her will was read, it was discovered she had left Alcoholics Anonymous a sum of $10,000 back in the 40s or 50s or whatever. And that was where they started to say, hey, we can't take that. Now, if it's to a group, I don't know how you would sort that out because the group isn't a legal entity. So if you die and it's like in your will, it's like, well, how do I find the No Serenity Till Brooklyn group? I mean, I guess I try to go and talk to somebody, but I mean, if anything, it might be like you would try to do that ahead of time to give, some money back. And the group might say, hey, that's too much. We don't want that. Give that to your family or whatever. But but the whole thing here is like, yeah, we cap those things so that we don't because that could be a snowball, and then we could start being fully dependent upon expecting that kind of income to show up randomly, or it's just not good for us to look at getting a bunch of money. And so we cap how much you can do each year, and we cap how much is available in a will, at least over here. And this is in that long form of the tradition that it's like we want to make sure that we're not getting money, property, money, and authority to become our focus, that we're not going to be diverted away. Um, And so one of the things they talk about here is, well, really quick, Karan, you also had your hand up. Did you have a further question on this?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to just complete the answer, then maybe I can ask him to one with that.
Well, I think that was about it. It's, we cap each year, and then I guess if you try to leave it to a group, it might be, I don't know how you do that. I guess you'd have to leave it to a person and a member and say it's for this purpose, and then it would be on the honor system that that member was actually, going to take the money and give it to the group. Or, you just would maybe make that decision before it gets to that crazy thing. But I'm not sure as it comes to the group level. I just know if it's AA as a whole, like General Service Office, we can only accept so much, and we can't take it if it's from the family member. If your wife or your parents or a non-alcoholic or a non-member tries to then send a check and say, this is on behalf of my deceased relative who was a member of AA for 35 years, they go, thank you so much for wanting to send us this contribution, but we can't accept your money. And I think we're the only institution that I've ever heard of in the entire history of nonprofits that doesn't take the money. And that's one of the things that I think is a beautiful thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how we stay with a primary purpose. That's how we stay in this one lane and are not are hopefully free of outside influence. Now, I've got a lot of other stuff to talk about with this at the board level and the office level and the history level. And I want to talk about prudent reserves really quick, but let's go to Quran and then we can move forward.
All right. So, I mean, take a call if you want to answer my question right now or you want to park it for the later.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So, my question was related to how AA locally here appropriate the seventh tradition funds. I mean, a lot of the groups are autonomous and they have their own autonomy on how they want to handle their funds for sure. But at the structured level, uh, I say two things. One is we have this tradition of doing anniversaries, conventions, and all these things. I am okay with it personally, but we don't do a lot of structured service where this fund should actually go and support the groups and the structured service to do a much wider and diverse service. But year on year, many groups celebrate anniversaries, which barely do any group service, which just run meetings, which are free of cost, take money on seventh edition, just to maintain literature and pass it up GSO and the other service bodies if they want to. So this is how things function here. And is that a healthy practice? In my opinion, I don't think it's not. It is, because I feel they should more focusedly decide on what they want to do this with these funds to carry the message to a still suffering alcoholic.
I think it's a great question, and it's one of those where the first thing I'll say is, I'm not qualified really to speak on like traditions of local stuff, but I have some experience or some thoughts about how this would play out if I wanted to be a part of a group that observes, and is maybe a healthy group. And number one, I'll just say there's plenty of groups out here that do a similar thing where we have, some groups don't participate. A lot of groups over in the US and Canada don't participate in greater AA service. They don't have GSRs. We have in my area alone, there's over 1,500 registered groups in Area 49, just southeastern New York City, Long Island, and some 4 or 5 counties just outside of New York City. We are excited if we had 200 GSRs or 200 people attending an assembly, which would include the district committee members and the area assemblies. 200. That's like a sixth or a seventh of the groups at best. And usually we're not even close to that number. I mean, that would be a pretty large number. We don't even hit 200 usually. So that, in my opinion, that shows that really what we start to see is there's a large majority of groups in Alcoholics Anonymous that do not participate outside of the group activities with the area. And maybe they're kind of do some stuff with the central offices that are in the area, helping them out, find a detox commitment, doing that kind of thing or whatever. But, the service participation is really rough, and it's been that way for a long time. And that's one of the big problems. If you start serving outside of the home group in the area or a district, you realize it's hard to get people to do AA service outside of the regular meeting. And a lot of the meetings that don't really participate, when they get money, they do things like, we're going to go and do a bowling night, or we're going to do a picnic and a big potluck. We're going to do something and spend a bunch of money that we have extra for our group. And technically, that's the group's money, and it's what the group wants to do. In the AA group pamphlet, there's a suggestion about dispersing funds down the service and ladder, and over here and in that pamphlet, the dispersion is 50-30-10-10. They would suggest 50% of the extra money you have goes to your local intergroup, the 30% goes to your area, 10% goes to your district, and 10% goes to the general service office. I believe that's the thing. I could be wrong. But they suggest that you should support your local service bodies first. And then you should support the GSO with a little bit, and you should support, but that's where the extra money should go. And that's what they talk about here, is any money that you accumulate beyond beyond a prudent reserve for no AA purpose is dangerous. And so really quick, because that leads me into what is a prudent reserve. How do you know if you have extra money, first of all? How do you know if you've made it to having extra money? And then what I'll just share is, my home group has an anniversary every year for our group. We pass a second basket from about January or February until April, which is when the group anniversary is. Every meeting, we make an announcement and we pass a second basket that says, anniversary. And we say, we're passing the seventh tradition. We're also going to pass this basket. And it's, labeled and colorful or whatever. And we just say, if you want to contribute to our anniversary party, we're going to pass this basket. The anniversary meeting is the first Monday or the second Monday in April. It's our whatever anniversary. We're going to have a lot of food and great speaker, and do the whole party. So if you want to contribute money specifically for that party, here's the basket. And so that gives members and anybody in the meeting an opportunity to say, oh, they're not using the seventh tradition funds that they've collected for the group for their anniversary. There's a second collection completely that is the money that will be used for our anniversary. And so, like, I'll throw 20 or 40 bucks in that thing, or maybe, I'll throw a chunk of money in over the couple of months because I want the party to be great as a member. But that's separate than me putting money towards making sure we're paying rent, making sure we have big books for sale, making sure we have coins for newcomers, that there's coffee and tea and, creamer and whatever we need for the meeting. That's usually what I'm thinking about. I'm contributing money to make sure we have resources, we have literature we can give away for free. We have, the coffee and the tea and some cookies and stuff at the meeting, and that whatever the group needs to be able to function, that the group can pay its rent, and we can, sort that out. And so that's one of the, so how do we get to what is a prudent reserve? They talk about this idea that our guiding policy should be of prudence, financial prudence, that, we should only really be figuring out what a prudent reserve is. Now, a prudent reserve is effectively like having some liquidity and cash on hand. The way that I've come to understand how to calculate this is I have to look at what are the expenses for my group. What's the monthly expense for my group? My group happens to have 4 meetings a week, and we pay, I would say, about $1,000 a month to the 2 different spaces to make sure that we are covered for these 4 meetings, which is 16 meetings a month. So you do that math, and it costs $65 a meeting or something on average for my home group. It's not cheap. But we have over 100 people that attend one of our meetings, so we have people showing up, and we have the ability to cover that. And so we'll do the numbers, and a group typically thinks, I want to say about 3 to 6 months is a good group prudent reserve. So we're going to buy some, we have hospitality, call it $20 a meeting or whatever for, coffee and tea or something like that. Make sure that we can have some cookies. Plus how much it costs for us in the space. And you start to crunch in and get an idea. Well, how often do we need to buy literature? What does that look like? Maybe once a quarter, we're going to spend $200 or $300 on literature because we give some books away and, just, whatever it is. So, we try to figure out what does it cost for this group to function over a 3 to 6 month window. And our prudent reserve right now, I think, is set at $3,500 because that would be about 3 to 4 months of full-on operating expenses. We could suspend the coffee and stuff if we need to and just have the meeting. And if we have $3,500 on hand, that means that for 3 months we could take $0 and the group would have 3 months to sort out what the problems are and have some cash to be able to make sure the meeting is going. Talk to our landlords, let them know what's going on, whatever. Work out a better deal if possible. When you get to so I think that's what a group needs to do. A group would be smart to take a look at what does it cost for this group to run? Do we want 3 months on hand? Do we want 6 months on hand? But anything beyond that, we need to start figuring out how to go broke. And so a lot of times groups will decide every quarter we're going to look. And if we have a bunch of money every quarter over how much we have, or every summer, halfway, twice a year, we'll look at it, or once a year, depending. We'll look at how much money we have above that number that we have as a prudent reserve. And if we have additional money, we will, and in reality, a healthy group should be dispersing that money down the service structure. That was money that was given to Alcoholics Anonymous to be able to do AA stuff. So we have a district that needs some funds. We have an area that needs some funds, and we have a central office that needs some funds. And then the general service office, whatever the world service, organization that we have in our area. Over here, it's just GSO, but there's GSOs and offices for all these different parts of the world. So in a perfect world, those 4 places are where we're going to start dispersing additional money so that we can make sure that, the local central office can do the services it's being asked to do, and that our general service office can do, have money to be able to take care of having employees to do all the work that they're doing. And in that way, that's AA supporting itself. We have a central office. We talked about this, I think, last time we were here about how we got this big Zoom room at the central office in New York, but that it was supported and ultimately paid for by the members, by the groups. That we have people on staff and on salary at the general service office and a budget of almost $20 million a year. And that gets covered by group and individual contributions and our literature sales that happen. And so we have this need, in a sense, to understand what the group needs to operate, but then we should be going broke. And some groups might choose to go broke by doing an event for themselves. And you could make the argument that that's a pretty self-centered way to spend AA's money. But if the group wants to do it, they're autonomous. It's their money. They can do whatever they want. If I'm going to join a home group, it's essential for me that my home group is connected to greater AA. That we have a GSR, we have an intergroup rep or a central office rep, that we have an interest in the larger community around us, that we're participating, that we have a voice. I find that important. I find it important because I want to know what's going on. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the decisions that are being made while I'm here. And if it's going to potentially impact me or AA down the road, I have a vested interest and a responsibility to make sure that AA lives on. And so I want to know what's going on. And if we ever do the concepts, what you'll find out in the 7th concept, incidentally, is the 7th concept talks about the real power in AA is the power of the purse. That if the groups don't like what's going on, we can stop sending them money, and then ideally the powers that be, the people doing service at the bottom that are actually dealing with the bigger budget of having an office and employees and all that stuff, if they see a massive drop off in contributions from individuals and groups, that they have to wake up and actually take notice of that. And it's kind of playing out a little bit over in our part of the world right now, because there's a lot of groups that are upset with decisions that have been made and are actively not sending money to general service office as a whole, or the general service entities as a whole. Unfortunately or fortunately, we're also seeing an increase of contributions on the people that are sending contributions. So it's not like those messages aren't really making it right now. What was I wanted to, I wanted to talk about one more thing on a bigger scale here, and I'm spacing out. And maybe that was it. Oh, so here's a fun on a bigger picture. AA is self-supporting through its own contributions, but what I can tell you is not once in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous have we ever been self-supporting by the group and individual contributions alone at the general service board level. When you're going down to the triangle and you're going to the office and you're going to the board of trustees, which are the servants that are here to, make sure that the pamphlets are printed and deal with all the publishing stuff. We have never once even really been close to covering all that money that is needed to make that office run solely by group and individual contributions. Where we make up the difference is our literature sales. And that's really what we are. If you really wanted to get to a legal definition of what is Alcoholics Anonymous is legally three, I believe it's three. Because I think the board of trustees are their own 501c3, but then there's Grapevine and World Services. World Services prints the books. Grapevine is in charge of the Grapevine magazine. And they're both 501c3 nonprofit corporations in the state of New York. And they're publishing companies. And as a result, they're that's the legal entity that they are, and they sell literature back to the membership and to whoever wants to buy it. And we're getting closer and closer to a 50-50 split. We're like 60-40, 59-41, maybe 2 years ago. I don't know if I've looked at this year's conference report to see the split, but it's very close. It's almost a 50-50 split of how much money we get from individuals and group contributions and how much money we get from literature sales. And the reality is our general service office is dependent upon literature sales to be able to sustain itself. So we've never been self-supporting by the contributions. We've been self-supporting by the contributions bolstered by the sales of the literature to the groups and the members. And the reality is anybody can buy that. One of our biggest customers over the years has been Hazelden. And Hazelden is a series of treatment and medical facilities all over the country. And they've been an incredible friend of Alcoholics Anonymous from the beginning. But there's a story from, I don't know if this was maybe the 80s or the 90s. It was a while ago now, where apparently the general service office used to offer a bulk discount. So if you're a member and you went to GSO and you wanted to buy one book, you're paying, let's call it $10 for the sake of simplicity. And if the local central office bought, say, 5,000 books for the year, well, we'll have groups and 5,000, they would maybe get them for $8, right? They get a little bit of a discount. But then Hazelden would come along and they'd buy 50,000 books, and they would get them for like, $6 or $5.50, because they would be giving this discount. If you're going to buy this much stuff from us, we'll give you a discount per unit. You see that all the time at grocery stores and all sorts of stuff. You buy bigger in bulk, you get better price. And we used to do that. And what we realized one day was that we had become dependent upon that yearly infusion of money from Hazelden to really cover and get us over the line. However much money Hazelden would give us in that one go, we were dependent upon it. And then because Hazelden was getting a better deal than our central offices, they were actually selling the books for cheaper and kind of undercutting the market, because they were getting them for $5 instead of $8. They could say, well, we'll sell $6.50 on it. And that was cheaper than our central offices could get. So more members were buying books from Hazelden, and we started to see that we were actually becoming dependent upon Hazelden. We were undercutting our ability for our central offices to actually, sell their product, because there was being offered for cheaper on the marketplace. And it became clear that we were actually having a seventh tradition dilemma with Hazelden. that we become dependent upon this outside agency to sort this out. And so we had to come to an understanding of what to do. And the ultimate end goal was we stopped doing the bulk discount. And we talked to Hazelden about it, and they understood, and they've been a great friend to us, and they bought fewer books, and it was able to kind of equalize. And so those are some of the things on a bigger scale that we have to watch out for. You wouldn't think about that, but it's like that literature order we became dependent on. And a big part of that is because we're not self-supporting. We never have been. And so here's what it could look like. Here's the utopia view. If Alcoholics Anonymous was completely self-supported by the membership and by its groups, we could give the big book away for free. We could give all literature away for free. You know, we're not here trying to make a profit, but if you ever notice how the money for the books increases, maybe you've noticed this where you're at, or maybe not, but over here, the price of literature will change. Why does the price of AA literature change? Is usually in direct proportion to where we happen to sit with the prudent reserve for our general service office. So at the office level and at the area level, we're shooting more for 9 to 12 months. The groups that we were talking about, 3 to 6 months for prudent reserve. The office and the general service office and most central offices in most areas are looking at more of a 9 to 12 month budget to give us some, runway. So the general service office, prudent reserve, you'd want to see about 90% to 100% of the year's budget. And right now we are under 6 months, I want to say. We've been hemorrhaging money left and right since the pandemic, and we've gotten this idea that the prudent reserve is another form of a checking account or something. We keep drawing it down and trying to bail out Grapevine, and we've got all sorts of funny office expenses right now. We're making some poor decisions to move to a different floor to then 2 years or 3 years later move back from a different floor. We've burned a couple $1 million up on that. So we're not really making great financial choices at the board level right now, it would seem, at least in the immediate. And so we've been struggling. And so, but if we were at 100% and we started having to bleed money, like, how does the general service office bleed money above its prudent reserve? Well, we lower the cost of literature so that over time we bleed out some of the excess profit by paying more for the literature and recouping less. And so if our membership actually was sending us enough money, we would actually be able to print and sell the books basically at cost or for free, because we would have extra money to deal with and we could just give away our literature. But because we can't do that and we are dependent upon literature sales, that's why our books cost what they cost, because we need a profit on that because we aren't able to support ourselves. And so in a perfect world, again, if we were all completely happy with what AA is doing, we were all contributing, it wouldn't even be that much. If you contributed over here, if each member contributed not even $10 for the year, if they say there's 2 million members in the US and Canada or whatever it is, if we contributed $10, we would basically be pretty much fully self-supporting over here. So it's not like AA needs a lot of money from any one person to do what it does, but most people don't contribute to the service entities beyond the home group. And they might do it for personal reasons. They might just do it out of ignorance. But if we really wanted to be fully self-supporting, then our literature could be super cheap. And if you think about, I don't know about what you guys see, but a lot of times when an alcoholic shows up off the street, they don't have a lot of money. And now we're telling them they need $12.50 to get a big book, or some member will pay $12.50 to give them a book, but that's not cheap. That's a reasonable amount of money for a piece of literature. We just put out this new plain language book that's supposed to be a tool for accessibility, a barrier to those that have accessibility issues, and we're charging like $12.50 or we're charging a boatload of money for that book. Why? Well, because we have to sell these books to be able to support the office. And so to me, this is an important conversation to look at, is how much are we dependent upon literature sales versus group and individual contributions? And if we're having a problem with group and individual contributions, why are we not taking putting some brain power to ask those questions of where those are coming from? Go ahead, Karan.
Yeah, my question is with respect to the WSO at New York uh, supporting India's GSO with the financial funds required for the translations of the big books in our country into our local languages. I mean, I just wanted to know, does that really happen? Does US and Canada's GSO or the WSO Center really supports a lot of other countries in printing literature for their countries? Because each country has their own GSA, right?
Yeah, I feel like we've done a lot of the translations, which is an interesting consideration. And perhaps maybe the reason that we end up doing the translations is we get the ask before they've really established themselves with the service body or service entity. I'm not sure though. But yeah, I mean, the general service office over here is seen as like the mothership, right? It's where it started, and we are available and try to be a resource and help all the other areas across the country or across the world where we're getting general service offices started. But we also let everybody do their own thing. But there's the money is an issue, right? And the main thing is we can't. So the question is, what if Hazelden comes to us, right? If we're dependent upon their literature and does that story of the pastor or the priest that I said, if we're dependent upon Hazelden every year to give us that money, and Hazelden comes and says, we really think that, we got a lot of people that are doing drugs and have eating disorders. And what if we could open that first step up and include more people? What do you think about that? And if we're dependent on their money, how do we say no? So having it be that we're not is really important. But our office does go and try to help everybody as best we can. And right now, our office is really struggling. And some of the people in this country and in Canada are talking about it. And some people, as Dave and I were just talking about before this phone call, seem to want to put their head in the sand and just say everything's fine. And I'm a believer that these are conversations that are important. If we're struggling with our money and we're not being prudent about how it's being spent, and we're not having clarity around where the money is going and what really we're spending it on, then how are we supposed to get an informed group conscience of AA as a whole as to how to best move forward? We can't do that without that information. And it's impossible to bring all of it back to all the membership, because then we'll never get anything done. But we do have a need for some more prudence, in my opinion, in the financial department, because we are not even close to our prudent reserve. And that's warning, I would say. If we're chopping into our emergency money on decisions that are being made that don't seem to be emergency decisions, that seem to be choices, and we're not going to cut back our expenses for a little bit and lean out and figure out how to operate within our means, then we're going to continue to eat away at this thing until we blow it all up. And we don't seem to have that kind of consideration going on. Not in my area, at least. My area thinks everything's fine. I'm the one crazy person out there raising my hand going, does anyone see there might be a problem with the money? And then I get looked at like, why is this guy talking? Won't he shut up? But so let's talk then, because we haven't brought this, but let's talk about our own lives. I need to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Now, that doesn't necessarily just mean money. When I talk about this with my sponsor, and we went all through this, the way he talks about it is, and think about it in a marriage, he wrote it like this, because each partner ought to strive to be fully self-supporting, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Self-support in the home can look different. Not everybody has both. Over here we have a whole couple, husband and wife both work. There's a lot of cultures where that's still not the vibe. So if my wife isn't working, she might not be able to be fully self-supporting on the financial sense. But do we look at the totality of the marriage as in the family as the whole? So my partner can support the family in other different, other ways. If you have a child at home, how can they be fully self-supporting? They can't legally work at 8 years old, but they could start doing some chores. There's ways for us to contribute and give back that are not financial in other relationships in our lives that might be able to put us in a position where we are given the autonomy to make choices and participate. And I think that's an important piece to look at. And then the other side is to look at, am I am I self-supporting? And what I would say self-supporting would look like spiritually and emotionally would be I'm God reliant. This isn't about me being self-sufficient and self-willing my life, but it's like, hey, if I've got a relationship with God and I'm able to find peace within me and I've got a quiet mind and my spirit is full, then I'm not going and trying to build relationships in the world where people have to give me those things. What does it look like if I'm dependent upon you to bring me emotional stability? What does it look like if I'm dependent upon you to give me spiritual grounding? Or is it my responsibility to go forward and really live a program of recovery and make sure that I'm able to walk around in the world hand in hand with God and be connected in that way? And then my partner becomes a wonderful asset and a beautiful part of my life, but they're not the piece that's there to prop me up. Obviously, there's moments where we're all going to be needing some help and we're going to need to lean into the relationships we've developed in the world. But I think as a whole, the goal here in my mind is that I need to be fully self-supporting. I'm not here to seek spiritual grounding or emotional grounding from my partner. That's not necessarily going to make it a healthy relationship if my partner is needed to bring me that level of wholeness. Karthik has a hand up.
Yeah, a couple of things. For me, personally, uh, I'm still not self-supporting financially, at least. I still have to make some loans and monthly things. Of course, I'm trying to work better on my financial discipline, but it is still not happening. So that kind of, I would say, the pride or if the pride that when asking people money really hurts me. And also this tradition keeps bothering me. That's one part of the financial part of it. With respect to relations, I think fellowshipping is very important for me. Without fellowship, uh, my recovery is not complete. So, isn't that dependency on relations?
Well, it's an interesting point, this whole fellowship deal. Yeah, I need community. It's a very human thing. We have a literal part of our brain that's only function is to go back and run through all the social interactions we've been having with others and see how we can better connect. Because we're pack animals. A lot of alcoholics that tend to be lone wolves were the people that always felt on the outside looking in. I guess I look at fellowship a little different. I don't look at fellowship as I need the boys club to go hang out with. To me, fellowship is I need a community of other people live in this program that I can be able to reach out to and run by what's going on in my life and get some solid information, and that's useful. So I need that perspective. But more importantly, the fellowship that I'm building is like right here. How does this meeting even come to be that I get to hang out with all of you? It comes from I have been sitting here for a bunch of years now trying to carry a message. And as a result, it's attracted people to me and it's built a fellowship around me where I have this amazing opportunity to be with people on a regular basis. But the sole focus of that has always been I'm here. I've had an experience with this program. I've become a total dork and a nerd in AA and wanted to learn all about our history and all about our traditions and and I did the seeking and I wanted to learn everything. I don't want to be a sucker. Maybe that's one of my own defects. I don't want to be the sucker in the room. I don't want to be sitting here and think that you guys have a secret that I don't know about. So I wanted to learn everything I could about AA so I could be fully informed so that when I can get my own arrogance and my head up my backside, that I'm an informed asshole. um, but so to me, I mean, I need to have part of this is I have to have a group to give back to, and I have to have a group of people to share this with. But my reliance has to be on spirit. my reliance has to be on that. God is what is supplying me with the peace of mind and all the joy and the happiness, and all that is coming from a wholeness in my spirit that I found only through utilizing this program of recovery. And then through living from that place with an awakened spirit, it has brought a fellowship around me that I get to share all that with. And to me, that's what is the most important. Not like I've got my homies to go and, shoot the shit with. That's great. We all got to have friends, right? But I'm not dependent upon my friends to supply me with that spiritual and emotional grounding on a day-to-day basis. If my life is hitting a wall, though, then the fellowship of people in my life and people coming to is going to be absolutely essential. And so I would look at that as that's the benefit of building good relationships, is then when any of us is hitting a wall, we have a community that will come and rally around us. And you see it time and time again in AA when someone gets a family member is diagnosed with cancer, or a big loss of, a parent dies or a child, you see the community of Alcoholics Anonymous come around them, but they haven't necessarily been dependent upon that community. This is the only way that gives me this peace of mind and this peace of spirit. Dave raised his hand, and Dave is a homie of mine who I just asked and was told we can have our homies come in. So Dave and I were chatting right before this, and he's been listening from the road.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Phillips, recovered alcoholic, current sobriety date, July 22nd, 2001. My first AA meeting was in the late 70s, so that's a long time to come into and around AA and not recover, keep going back out. So Devin brought up some really phenomenal points, and I know that one gentleman was talking about, this thing not dependent on other people for money. And so there was a principle, a concept that was passed on from my one of my spiritual advisors, Mark Hughes, and it was found during this spiritual exercise that a group of us, I'm pretty sure Devin's done it before, called Steel on Steel. And one of the concepts and one of the questions that were asked toward the end of answering these questions every 2 weeks was, am I a good steward of God's money? I had never ever heard of that, So apparently I'm given money down here by God, not man, but by God Almighty, to better do his will. And when I'm seeking balance with this harmony with my Father, I quit pursuing the outside worldly stuff that's very attractive. It's shiny and it's fun when it's new. But it turns out, my pursuit of those money, property, and prestige that we basically have been inundated with since we were little kids through advertisements and through cultural norms, it looks like that's the happy thing. But I've had like various times where I've had reached a level of success, and then that very thing that I sought after, the shiny stuff, it ends up controlling me. So then instead of it serving me, I begin to serve it. So what AA did is set all that stuff aside. And I want to commend this group, and I want to commend my friend Devin, because he's one of my favorite people, teachers in AA, is the fact that you're learning something that most people in AA are clueless about, which is traditions. Because most people in AA, they just don't want to drink or use drugs anymore, or combination of such. But the depth and the weight of all three legacies, that's what gives you the balance. And I just read something on, I think it was the Daily Reflection or 24-Hour Day. It was on AA, GSO's website. And it talked about AA being a three-legged stool. And I got sober around people that got sober in the 50s, and that's what they talked about. Lamar, who died with close to 60 years of sobriety, I was at a conference where he was one of the speakers, and he said, and he's used to milk cows, and he said he referred to it as a three-legged stool. You might be able to balance on two if you're lucky, but if you balance on one, you're eventually going to tip over and fall. So I had to learn, and it took me a long time to eventually surrender to this 12 steps. It put me in a relationship with God, and then thank God I had a spiritual advisor like Devin that was willing to teach me the traditions and the concepts, and how critical that is for me to have harmony, not only within me, myself, and I, but people, places, and things, and that's critical. And everything he covered with you is exactly, because him and I both know, I only know one Class A trustee. Devin may have met more, but I know a bunch of Class B trustees. And what made no sense in A and B is A's the non-alcoholic. I always thought the A's, that should be the alcoholic, because no, they were like, A's are the non. So the board consists of 7 non-alcoholic trustees. They're the professionals that AA seeks out to help balance us out, because Bill and Bob, in deciding this great thing, especially when Bill's getting ready to die, they want this to continue on forever. As long as an alcoholic is in need, how can we function? So we decided a long time ago that we should have a board dominated by alcoholics, but having 7. So there's 14 Class B trustees. And like Devin said, our board has done a lot of stuff that I don't agree with, and we got a book that was recently put out that like doesn't resemble, it wasn't even written by an alcoholic. There's the difference, and could have been done probably a lot cheaper if they had asked an alcoholic who went to school for something they're not going to make money over, but they got a degree, and we could have done that. But every group's autonomous, and I really do commend you guys, because a lot of people aren't interested, from what I can tell. And I've been in meetings all over the world. I've been in meetings all over this country. I've been a speaker. I go to Akron, Ohio on a regular basis. I was just there this weekend, and I spoke in 2023 in front of that areas, which consisted of Akron, which is the birthplace of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill and Bob, Cleveland, which is where the first AA meeting was actually started, not in Akron, if you know the history of that, and then the 2 other towns. And I spoke in front of, and they got, I think it's like Devin had said, they got like 1,500 groups. There was only like less than 200 people there. And they were overjoyed that they had it, because service is the last thing that seems everybody likes taking, but the people that actually are willing to sacrifice do the service. They do the heavy lift. So with that, try to be a good steward of God's money. Realize it's not your money. Maybe it's God giving you money to better do his will. And if you quit seeking that outside stuff and seek a relationship with God, everything will be added unto you. And that's biblical. Thanks.
Thanks, brother. I wanted to share a little bit too about my experience with some of this stuff, which is, when I first got sober, my parents had been able to help me out with rent for a year. And when I got to New York, and I was coming up to the year, I was like, August 28th of 2011, September 1st would have been, now it's on you to pay for your life. So we're talking 2 to 3 days. And so, it took some time. I've worked freelance as an artist and a musician my entire life. So basically been a small business owner, for the entirety, working paycheck to paycheck, not having much of anything. But as I was able to slowly build a career, they talk about we're going to know a new peace and a new freedom. And what I can tell you is that for the last bunch of years now, last decade, if not more, probably more than a decade, every bill and every bit of life that has pretty much happened has been paid for from the income that I've made in my career. All the stuff that I own, all the crap that I have, the parking tickets I've accrued, the any of the expenses of life. And what I can tell you is I have an 828 credit score, something absolutely bonkers on an 850 scale. I mean, I'm like about as high on the credit scale as you could get, because I've been paying my bills on time for a bunch of years. And I walked in here suicidal at 24 with, $0 to my name and no way to live. And all I'd ever done was, sell drugs to make money and play a couple of gigs that didn't really pay that well. to me, that feeling of accomplishment of being an alcoholic, I mean, I don't like it. My wife would probably hear me and shake her head right now, but it's like when taxes come around, I usually have to pay money because I get paid as an independent contractor, so they don't take the money out. So every tax time, I have to pay some money usually. And the money's always been there to pay. And I'm not a fan of paying money in taxes. Like, let's get that on. I'm not a fan of, but I am able to contribute into the system that I live in. And I'm able to walk around knowing that, like, I'm not cutting corners. I'm not cheating a system. I'm not lying. That the money that I have in a bank account is money I've worked my ass off to get. And that I have the autonomy then and the ability to make choices in my life because that's my money and I have some freedom. Now, Dave put it more aptly, it's God's money. Right. But I'm saying is I've been able to meet the responsibilities of my life living in New York City by my own contributions here. I've been given opportunities to have work and I've been able to pay my bills and I've got money left over. And then my job is, am I being a good steward here? Am I taking care of what is given to me? Is there a reason that I have this money? Maybe it's not for me to go buy a bunch of things that I want. Maybe there's a reason for me to have a little money so I can, right now my work calendar just opened wide up after a year of crazy work every single day, almost for 10 and a half months. Now I have like a bunch of free time and I've got some money in the bank. And my first thought is, cool, I can like take that drive over to New Jersey and go, hang out with the drunks that I sponsor in Long Island. And I can go and start using the funds that I have, take my wife out to a nice meal so we can have some time together, to be able to like build in what I see are the relationships and the communities that have been brought to me that I'm here to serve. And if I'm dependent upon outside money or I'm dependent upon somebody to give me that spiritual or that emotional juice, like that's going to go fall short. I'm not free if that dependence is there. Karthik has his hand up. I want to read this one thing that Mike wrote about self-support and relationships. It's from my sponsor, and I can share the sheet. But one thing he wrote is, when we are dependent upon someone else for our well-being, we are vulnerable prey for sick relationships. This is especially demonstrated in the person who cannot feel whole without a love partner in his or her life all the time. Because of this sick, exaggerated need, the person fails to find a lasting relationship and thus goes from person to person, trying to find themselves and some security through someone else. People are put here to enhance our lives, not to be our lives. But when each partner of a relationship understands that he or she is responsible for their own survival and progress, a great spiritual strength flows into each partner, and thus the relationship is made doubly strong. Each partner doing his or her emotional growth, because no one has the ability to do this for another, is trying to do so, shows their own personal immaturity. You can't give away what you don't have. If you are not responsible for yourself, you cannot be an equal in your relationships. You then become a potential victim for the managers and controllers of the world. You place yourself in a position of great vulnerability and you will be hurt. If I'm dependent upon other people to make me whole, other people are going to disappoint me. The world is going to do me wrong. I can easily fall into self-pity, self-seeking, self-delusion, self-loathing. But if I place my dependence here on my creator and I make that the goal and I'm actually sustained there by a real source of power, I'm not dependent upon the world to make me whole. And I've been able to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet here as a result of that. And I can look the world in the eye today in ways that I never could. And to me, that's freedom. And that's the real gift that we're offered here, is the opportunity to look the world in the eye and being able to support myself financially, emotionally, spiritually, and then bring people into that is the best. Go ahead, Karthik, and then we'll probably be about to close this thing down. I can't seem to hear you.
You can't hear me?
I think I hear you
Can you
now.
hear
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
I think Hitesh wanted me to raise his hand because he's not able to. But before I give it to him, so what are your thoughts? I'm trying my best so that I don't depend on others. My self-seeking is more like towards good food, coffee, and cigarettes, and maybe spending on some AA friends who can't. I have selfishness there because I want their company. So yeah, I was spending some money on people who cannot afford it, but practicing the program. So these are the, I can do better. I know that. But yeah, maybe we should take this offline between you and me. Yeah.
Uh,
But so my is it because I get prideful too if I keep this tradition as a writing on the wall that I should not take money from anybody, and also I get self-seeking too, like I should earn money, or also I may try to be more harsh on myself for my spending. Yeah, so these are all the fallbacks I see. But my question here is, you know, even if I try my best, I know I need to do better. It's not the best. Yeah, but yeah. So again, maybe the financial elements. I think you know my story better. Yeah, have to be done. So how do I take it? Like at least do I? Like, is it really wrong to ask for money from my dad, or from my wife? Even after I try, of course, the ultimate goal is self-support.
well, I mean, I think you might have even answered the question, which is number one, like if I've got amends on the table that aren't done, then I'm kind of still living in the fantasy land of assuming that like I'm awake, but I might still be asleep. If I've got amends that haven't been addressed, then how do I know if I've actually really getting what's offered here? I think part of the question ultimately comes down to, am I willing to practice to bring the level of humility that might be required to the table to see what life would look like if I actually lived within a budget that I could afford. And I think that's a bigger question. If I'm working and I've got expendable income, I had expendable income for the first time in my life all year. I bought a bunch of stupid shit that I don't need. Now the money's stopped and I'm like, oh man, I could have probably saved twice as much money if I had really, and it was like, so I'm not by any means, I'm not qualified to answer somebody's, I'm not a financial planner or financial advisor. I'm not qualified to suggest what anybody should do with money. But I think what I've had to learn is like, I've had this up and down flow of random income as a creative. And I've had to learn how to like pay my bills every single month and be able to live in a way where I'm still able to pay my bills. And sometimes that's looked like I've had some money hanging out on credit cards and I'm paying the bills down every month, but I'm not able to pay them all off because we've had some, times where it was really rough in the shutdown and all that stuff. And these days it looks like I'm paying every bill on time. I pay the credit card down every single week to zero. I'm and it's like I'm basically not living on debt. I have a couple of loans. They're just one of those things where it's like every month they just take money and it's a small amount of money to pay the thing off. And I just don't think about it because the money's there and they get paid down and that's fine. I don't have to do the big grandiose, oh, I need to take $7,000 and pay this thing. It's like, or 3,500 or whatever it is now. Um, but I think there's some freedom to all that. Like if I can look the world in the eye and I'm the one who's paying for everything that I own, this gives me a sense of peace. And I know that I'm living within my means and I know that I'm actually within those lines. And I think to me that would be really the only consideration is if I'm living outside of what I can provide, is it possible to either A, I need to figure out how to, is there a lesson in that I'm ignoring? Maybe learning how to live with less is part of the deal here. And then if you're, like what I thought about literally this morning, I was like, man, maybe what I learned this year was I'm still not ready to really have the big money thing because I'm maybe not the best steward of God's money. And maybe there's a need for me to, maybe this year was a learning experience so that if I do get an opportunity to have full-time employment again and I see more money coming in, that's actually that this year shows me that like I need to be grateful if that's the situation and never take it for granted and plan accordingly. But what I can tell you is if you got financial money, having more money in the bank isn't removing, or financial fear, having more money in the bank isn't removing the fear. And so the real thing about this wholeness is not going to come from having more of the thing that I think I need. It's going to come from getting right with God. And if there's amends that are hanging out that haven't been approached and I haven't figured out how to start those things, then I think that's going to mean that we're still in some way blocked from really being able to get to that peace. And so I'm a big fan of whatever I got that's standing between me and God is the most important action that I have to look at. And if there's inventory, if I've got fear and resentment, or I've got problems in my marriage or with relationships, then I need to get on with that stuff and look at it. If I've got amends that I haven't addressed and I kind of kick the can down the road, then I think it's like, well, maybe it's time to sort that out. Maybe it's time to really get to brass tacks with this stuff and find out, well, maybe life's going to have to change. But maybe that's exactly the experience that I'm supposed to be going through that's going to fashion me to be more useful. My problem is I don't know what I need to be doing in order to be the most useful to my creator. And sometimes I want to know. I mean, that was my whole inventory I wrote last week was I really want to know what God wants me to do because I'll do it. Like, give me, show me your will, buddy. I'll do your will. But just, I need to know about it so I can know if I'm executing the plan right. And I had this fear of failure. And at the end of the fear of failure, what I wrote was, I'm really ultimately afraid because I'm not God and I so desperately want to be. That there's a part of me that just wants to be the power. Always. And what I'm ultimately afraid of is that deep down, I know that I'm not the power. But there's this loud voice in between my ears that keeps trying to pull me back to suggest that I have the power and I can make these choices. And that's one of my biggest sources of mental anxiety. So it may not be cut and dry, but if I've got problems with finances, then number one, it's like, well, where am I spending the money? Maybe I have to spend less money. How much money do I really have? Can I get a budget? Can I get a savings plan? If I owe money to people, why am I not figuring out how to pay them back? Or if I owe money to people and I'm not paying them back, is it possible that I'm not really fit to buy any kind of luxury items or additional extras because I'm effectively living on and living on other people's money? And that's something that, is one of those maybe old school AA truths, but I think that's one that holds on. Like, oh, if I'm out here buying a bunch of expensive stuff that I don't really need and I still haven't paid the guy back around the corner or even attempted to have that conversation and figure that out, well, then I'm still buying all this stuff on their money. It's not my money. And so if I can get even with God's kids, then maybe I can start to get into a relationship with God about the money. But to me, those are those we don't know. But I feel
We
like
have
it's
two
about.
more people.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
two more people who wanted to ask questions. One
Well,
is
come on with
Hitesh,
it.
and the other is Karan.
Sure.
So Hitesh was first, so let Hitesh ask, and after that, Karan.
Thank you, Karthik. Hi, Devin. How are you doing?
I'm great, brother. Good to see you.
Yeah. Good. Two things, Devin. One is definitely with not respect to tradition 7, but to do with functioning of a group. Now, this is again the question is both to Karthik and Devin. There is a group near my home which was functioning 3 to 4 months back. Suddenly it stopped because of internal conflicts between the group members. Now, and because of that, me and so many others are facing problems because it's not serviceable. The group is not serviceable. Now, can we do something to restart the group, or should we interfere, or we shouldn't interfere with the group? Uh,
I mean,
and to what extent?
are they still having meetings, or is like there's just not
No,
even a
they are
meeting?
not having the meetings from the last 3 months, around 3 to 4 months time.
Well, if there's no meeting happening, that would stand to reason that maybe it's just we got to start a new meeting. Groups fail.
Okay.
I think part of the thing about the traditions is this is why they're here, is that we have these guidelines so that we don't fail. But if we're
Yeah.
not willing to live with some spiritual principles and we don't see the importance of what the group brings, and that we need to figure out how to play well with each other, and realize that there's more than just our friendship. It's not a social club. Like, this isn't just us getting together and hanging out. This is a service for this community.
Absolutely.
And if that, so sometimes groups fall apart, and that's what you see. A group that doesn't really adhere to our traditions, ultimately a lot of times those are the groups that will fall apart. Not always, but and there's groups that adhere to not all of them. Like the groups that don't participate with GSO stuff, they just go, look, we're fine. We support ourselves. We want to throw parties. We got a solid crew of us, and it's fine. But you will see this thing sometimes where groups become insular. And it's like a group where for 30 years it's been the same group of 5 or 10 people, and they never attracted newcomers, and then they start to die, and the group ultimately dies because there's no one new showing up to the meeting. And so it's like, well, what did we do? What was our primary purpose? Were we really engaging and getting new people here, or carrying an attractive message? Maybe not, because we just had these same small group of people that came every week, and that was it. But if there's no meeting at all, and it's like
Mhm.
you got a chunk of you guys that are like, man, I could really use this meeting, I would say, and maybe you guys reach out to that same space and go, hey, there's a couple of us wanted to see if we can get a meeting, back it up and over here, and maybe find a different day or a different night or a slightly different time if it's possible, in case the other people want to come back, or reach out to them and say, hey, we're going to try to get this started. Do you care if we do it at the same time? Get a different name and just start a new group. Or maybe you just try to do it completely separate from them, pick a different day or a slightly different time, and see if you can find a space in the neighborhood and start something. And then, maybe
So,
you guys can use that as the learning experience of what not to do.
mhm, mhm. So, the suggestion would be not to start with the same name and same location. Uh,
I would say this, depending on, I wouldn't do it the same location and the same time. Like if it was Wednesdays at 7 o'clock, if you could do Wednesdays at 5:30, or Wednesdays at
okay.
8:30 or something, so it would still leave that timeline for them. Or you could just say, well,
Mm,
we'll do Tuesdays or Thursdays, or but you could also
okay.
reach out to some of those other people and say, hey, there's a couple of us that really feel like we want to have a meeting in this area. We notice that this meeting isn't happening. Do
Okay.
you guys have a plan of coming back? We want to be a good neighbor if we start another group, which is kind of what that fourth tradition long form talks about. Be a good neighbor. Consult the other group, even though they're not really there. Um,
Okay.
and
I think they're not there, but they're also like, they're very sick, those people. So what some of them are trying to do is restart the same group at the same time. Just restart the
With
meeting
the same name.
because each of them already have another home group. So they're just trying to restart this group, even though they have other home group.
well, and you could call it something different. I mean, because I don't know how it works as far as how easy it is to find space and all that stuff, but that would be more, you guys know the area, so you can maybe make those calls. But you could start a different name, different meeting with different, with the crew of people that want to be there, and maybe choose a different format if there's a format. Maybe we just try something new and see how that works, and just
Okay.
go for it. But yeah, if
Okay.
it falls apart, then it fell apart. So
Okay.
let's get it going again, or let's try something new.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's good to
Devin,
see you, brother. Thanks for the
do we
question.
have do we have a
Karan is the
time?
next one. Thank you, Hitesh. Thanks.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, what
Yeah.
was
Thank you.
Hitesh? What were you asking?
Yeah. I was saying, can't we? I mean, at the GSO level and where each group contribute a fixed percentage from the group collections every year to GSO. because your GSO functioning is also primarily important. I mean, they cannot be keep begging for money from outside.
Well, so each member should be able to contribute if they choose to GSO on their own. Like we have the ability for a member to just sign up and
Yeah,
say,
but
you know, you
there is,
could
since
take
there
a
is no
monthly.
mechanism, Devin, since we are mentioning about GSO generating revenues out of selling literature only, primarily literature only, and no other contributions unless the groups are doing it. So can't there be a framework where a little bit of money is contributed by the groups to GSO for its functioning, healthy function?
Well, that would be following like how we would suggest that that goes. You know, that if a group has extra money over a prudent reserve, then the group would send money down the service ladder. Like down, you know, it would go from the group to the area to the district and to the general service office and your central office if there's like a local office that like that would be the way that a group goes broke. And if the groups have extra money, then that would be ideally something that you'd have as a group conscience with each group and decide, which could be something that if you're going to restart this meeting, that could be a big part of it. You could say, hey, I think we need to figure out how to support the offices here. Can we just codify that, like, this is, you know, this is how much money it costs for this meeting. This is what our prudent reserve needs to be. And if we look in and we have a bunch of extra money, that we're going to send the money to down the service, you know, triangle so it can get to
But
those
that is a
places.
prerogative of each individual group. It's not a prerogative of a framework or a. Wouldn't there be? I mean, we have come a long way since 1900s to today, where a little percentage or some mechanism can't be generated or ask the GSO to put into our traditions where money is contributed to GSO.
I
Some
think the
fixed
operative
mechanism,
word,
I'm saying.
I think the operative word is voluntary.
Yeah.
That you have to volunteer it. And if people don't want to voluntarily contribute, we don't force people to, because then it would be part of a membership rule. Well, you want to be a group, well, you
Okay.
got to pay us X amount of money to be a group. Or you want to be an
Okay.
AA member, and now you have to pay a membership fee or a due to be a member. And that kind
Okay.
of goes against maybe our third tradition, which says the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, and that
Okay.
any two or three alcoholics gathered together for sobriety can call themselves an AA group, provided there's no affiliation. And so, if we start to put those requirements on groups, we start to kind of muddy the waters. So, if the group voluntarily wants to contribute, then they get a chance. And hopefully, the General Service Office is doing a good job of showcasing here's what we're doing and here's why our services are valuable. And we as members, if we have GSRs and district committee members and our area representatives, can be making it clear that the money that comes to us helps us to facilitate the 12-step work of helping alcoholics get sober. And if all that's wrapped up, then, you know, people are sending money. Oh, we're helping sober up drunks. We're getting books in their hands. We're getting meetings to detoxes. We're getting pamphlets and free literature over to the jail. Like, I want to be a part of that. Take some money. But if we fail to connect all that, then it's like, why would I ever send them my money? But so as a group, you know, again, for my group has as much as I disagree sometimes with right now sending money down the service triangle because I don't agree with what they're doing, I believe in the principle that we should be contributing. And that's how we have a voice, is that we're a contributing group. I'm a contributing member in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I get to have a voice. But that would be, you know, the autonomy piece. We don't have requirements for groups or members to be a member or be a group other than no affiliation. And, you know, so, but it's a great question. And yeah, I mean, I wish all groups would do it. It would make sense. but we don't put those as like hard and fast rules, right? Really quick, Karan had a question, and Dave
Thank
also
you.
has his
Thank you.
hands up. And then I think we'll probably want to shut this thing down. Karthik, did Karan still have a question?
Yeah, Devin. I mean, are you okay to take this question now, or you want me to park it for the next week?
I mean, we're here. Unless people have to
Uh,
run, I've still got a little bit of time before this dude comes over for us to look at some third step stuff.
oh, that's good. Okay, thank you. So my question is like mostly like a follow on to what topic is asked. because my situation is also kind of similar to him. At least he's earning a bit, I am not at all. So a couple of things. When I walked into AA, I was broke. I mean, like I, I, I was not in an earning capacity. I was totally immersed in debts and dependent on my family for money and survival. Uh, I didn't have any plans for the career or future. Uh, and but when the seventh edition was told to me, I tried my hands at getting into a job and trying to sacrifice my interests, which lie in the creative field. I did that for a bit. I come out of that. Then I realized that creative field is where I want to really be personally, and I started dedicating my time towards uh, working with people there. But still, it's not earning me any money as of now, right? It's we are putting in our work since the last 2.5 years continuously, but we haven't landed anything yet, you know. So and all this time I'm being supported by my family. I'm definitely trying to be of support non-financially by trying to help them with something or the other. But it feels like sometimes it comes to a point where I feel that I'm just using my creative thing as an excuse to not fully go out and properly give these many hours a day to work so that I justify my commitment towards my career building. And whether that brings me reward or not is in God's hands, but I'm not doing that on a daily basis. So that is where I'm at. But I see progress. I mean, today at least I don't, the people that I work with, I'm trying to be consistent there. I'm trying to show up for them no matter what. And I'm trying to do the work that's required to make them do what they want to do. So this is where I'm at in life, where I'm, not financially independent. I'm not financially earning yet. Uh, and the field is set. So, I mean, you have a similar field, right? So I probably would have some experience that you can share.
Thanks for the question and for sharing. So I guess I'm somewhat conflicted as a creative and as someone who has known from a very beginning that there was something that my buddy Kenny, who passed away maybe a couple of years ago now, for either beginning of this year or 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago now. No, it was 2 years ago. Kenny passed away, and we had these conversations about what's your heart's desire. Is it possible that if you have something that's laying on your heart that you feel is a calling in your life, and you ignore that actually you're ignoring part of who you were intended to be, that God had put this desire, this thing on your heart to go out and do that. And not everybody has creative abilities in different ways. And some of us have really good vision, and we can see the photography thing, or we're artistic and can paint and draw, and some of us play music, and some of us are really good with numbers and organizing charts, and whatever it is. If you find something that you're drawn to, that perhaps that's there for a reason, and part of my job is to nurture this gift that I had from my creator. And that might be to live in the humility of what I was called to. I felt that as a career musician. That as a kid, I just never questioned if I was going to go anywhere else. That doesn't always mean that financially you're going to be able to do just that to support yourself. So it's always been kind of like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do and who I am. But if I have to do something else, we'll do something else. I just been in a situation where for a while now I've been able to just play music, and that's worked. But then there's the other side of it, which is like, look, these are also not rules. It's not like I'm failing AA if I have a family that's willing to help me out. But I would look at it as the warning for me is, if I really want to experience freedom, it's when I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet. And so that's a big part for me, is I like to be able, for me, it was an amazing feeling to realize that I was paying my bills off of my own contributions, that every meal that I ate, all the stuff that I had, everything was paid for by the work that I was doing. And for a drunk, that gave me a sense of accomplishment that I can't really understate how big it was. but every one of us is in a different situation. And it's like sometimes if you're going to go to school, you need financial help to go to school to then go out on that career and do the thing that is going to help change the world. If you have to go get a doctorate or a master's degree, you have to do that on some charity and some stipends and maybe family help and taking loans out. That's not like, oh, I'm not living in the essence of AA's tradition. That's I'm investing in this future, and then I'm going to go out and I get to be involved in that and I can pay that back. So it's really hard to say there's one way to do this or what's right and what's wrong. To me, the striving here is my goal is to be able to support myself and to be able to feel that freedom. And if along the way there's some help that allows me to go out and maybe live in the true essence of who I believe God intended me to be, then it would be stupid for me to not take that help. But I could also then try to figure out how do I pay that back and how do I get even with the world. And to me, it's like, it's a to thine own self be true situation. And some of us come from families that have wealth and will want to help us out. It would be stupid for us to say, no, I'm not going to take the help. But again, if do I look at that as this is my money to do with it whatever I want, or is it like, hey, this is an opportunity that I've got, this is God's money, and how can I best serve with the position that I have? And I think that's more maybe the consideration to go on. And then like what Kenny would say, what's your heart's desire? If your heart's desire is I need to go and really pursue this creative thing because it's who I am, I need to be a writer or whatever it is, then maybe I have to really give some space and attention to that and see what happens. And if I've got a little bit of a help to go down that road, then I just have to be real with myself if it's a pipe dream or if it's actually God's will. My experience is if it's God's will for us, it's going to happen. That's the reality. We all know what God's will is. It's what's happening. That's simple. So Dave had his hand up. I'm gonna turn it to Dave, and then I think we'll probably shut this thing down and we can pick it up next week.
So real quick on a couple points that Devin and others brought up. So in America, we have clubhouses, Alano, and they're separately incorporated. And those clubhouses, almost all of them, have dues for the member. They are a separate outside incorporated structure. And the way AA is set up, and Bill covered this when he started talking about traditions, is so that if something happens bad at that facility, clubhouse or whatever it is, it can be easily discarded because AA is AA. AA doesn't have dances. AA doesn't have picnics. Groups do that, but it's not AA as a whole. And one of the concepts, the other point I wanted to make is when I was brand new this time, I ran into recovered alcoholics down in Baltimore, and they were like, some of those guys got sober back in the 50s. And what I found ironic is they would buy me coffee, they would feed me as long as I made it down there. And here's the irony of it. I'm beginning to make money because I'm not paying a bartender. And I remember trying to chip in because we're going into meetings that are hundreds of miles away. And I'm experiencing something called the meeting before the meeting, meeting after. It's priceless, right? And I remember trying to give my spiritual advisor money for gas. I didn't have much, but I tried to give him $10. He goes, "We don't want it." I'm like, "You're kidding me." And George goes, "No, we don't want what you got, but you might want what we have. We're not here to take anything from the newcomer." And I've always kept that principle to a newcomer. And there's also the spiritual principle of paying it forward. I just did that. One of the gals that I worked with years ago is going through a hard time, and she just got fired from her job last week, and she's got 2 little kids. And she's breaking down to me over the phone that like, "Oh my God, it's Christmas, not now." I've been there, and I have sent her Western Union. She didn't ask. I wasn't offering it. And when she called back to tell me, and I said, "Don't thank me." Because see, when we pay stuff forward, we don't get any credit for it. We want all the credit to go to God. And by doing that, humility, I stay in my lane. And truly, we do have the ability to make a indelible mark in somebody's growth toward their relationship with God. Because either in the way Ignatius says, either God is everything or God is nothing. What is your choice to be? I want to stand with my Father. Thanks.
Thanks, brother. I think we've done good work here today. I've had a little bit of a longer session, which was nice. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording.